You are not a bother for asking for help.
Breastfeeding should not be painful.
And you deserve someone who will actually answer your questions and not dismiss your experience. Welcome to the Be Well Baby podcast. I'm Dr. Emily Spaeth, founder of Be Well Baby in Portland, Oregon, and the Beyond Birth Blueprint, an online community where we support families through pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and especially life with a baby. This podcast exists because I believe families deserve better than what I am seeing in my work as a physical therapist, lactation consultant, and childbirth educator. Just a quick loving note before we dive in. Everything you hear on this podcast is for educational purposes only. It's not medical advice. Every body and every baby and every season is different, and you deserve support that is personalized to you. Let's get started. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back, everyone. Today's guest is someone I get to work alongside every week, and I have been looking forward to sharing this conversation with you for a long time. Faith Samaan is a lactation consultant with over 17 years of experience. She spent years in the hospital system, seeing virtually every feeding situation imaginable in every setting imaginable, and now she does home visits with our Be Well Baby families. One of the things that I love about Faith is she started this work because she was the patient who couldn't get a straight answer, and she decided to become the straight answer. So in this episode, we cover what to actually expect when you are hoping to breastfeed your baby in the first 24 to 72 hours. We talk about the truth about bottle flow rates and why level 1 doesn't necessarily mean what you think. We talk about triple feeding, what it is, what it does to your mental health, how it works. And I ask Faith some rapid fire territory questions about chest feeding, silverettes, pacifiers, nipple shields. And we talk about the one product Faith wishes every parent would throw away. So this is one of those episodes you will want to share with your partner, your sister, and honestly, anyone who's ever told a new parent that breastfeeding should just come naturally. Let's dive in. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It feels really fun to have you live in person here. I would love for you to start by sharing the story of how you became a lactation consultant.
Okay. That was such a long time ago that I actually have to think through that a little bit.
How long ago was that?
Was actually about 17 years ago that I think I really got into it. I was already working in the healthcare and was noticing that after you have your baby, all they do is eat. And when they don't eat very well, they don't sleep very well. And then I became pregnant, and I worked at the time in a department that wasn't super friendly for taking leave. And then when I had my baby and breastfeeding was going terrible, I asked for a lot of help while I was in the hospital. Actually, I asked for it every day that I was there. And then I asked for it after when I came home. And every time I would ask very specific questions and nobody could really give me an answer. Some of the main things were major nipple trauma.
And for anyone listening who's like, what is nipple trauma? Bleeding, cracked nipples, uncomfortable, pain, ouch, nipples.
Yeah. In the first 24 hours, they were raw. And I started just cringing anytime he was ready to feed. And then I didn't know it at the time when he started moving into second 24 hours and he was cluster feeding. And then my nipples really felt like they were going to fall off. So it just became more and more frustrating that every single time I would ask questions and they should all have some answer to them instead of somebody saying, well, we don't know, or yeah, I just did nothing really, even my milk supply. I would say, you know, my anatomy is great. I'm doing all the things that I'm supposed to do that you're telling me I'm supposed to do. And it's different when you have your own baby versus being in a outside perspective, and I just became more and more frustrated. And then I did not want to go back to work full time. That's where I was at the time. So I just decided while I'm on leave, I started doing a lot more research and just decided I'm not going back. This is terrible. I'm not in a mentally great space with feeding my baby. I would be returning to work full time. I would have been gone 12-hour days.
Yeah, so long. It's really hard as a nurse to go back after postpartum. I think something that really brings up for me is the idea that there's just so many people feeding their babies postpartum, and so many of them are not getting the support that they want or need. And for you to, I mean, so many of us come to this work because we've had our own personal experiences with it, right? But I think for you to have the wherewithal to be like, okay, I'm not doing that, so I'm going to learn as much as I can about this experience because this is not how it should be.
Right. Yeah. So I just decided, well, before I told them for sure I'm not coming back, I'm just going to take some time and see if I can, where these classes take me and where that leads me. And basically every door since then just continued to open. It was like, this was where I was supposed to go. Every piece of it felt right. Daycare aligned. I mean, every door opened. And then I feel like I became really lucky to have been told about this one, my mentor, and I was her last student.
Wow.
And so I had to interview with her. I wouldn't have known that had I not had been directly connected with the right people. And I interviewed and got it, obviously.
Yay.
And then
Who was your mentor?
Peggy Andrews.
Amazing.
She's an amazing human. She's still alive and just turned 80 years old.
Wow.
When I started with her, I believe at the time she'd been in labor and delivery for 40 years.
Wow.
Like over 40 years. She'd already been doing lactation. She had actually built the program at the particular hospital she was working at the time. She had built the lactation program pretty much from the ground up. So she was sort of leaving it to myself and one of my other colleagues now, student at the time, for us to pretty much take over. And she really wanted us to continue running it the way that she had taught us. So helping different moms and just listening to their stories and listening to how to help them in an appropriate way versus just being more dismissive of why things aren't working.
Yeah. So after you were postpartum, you said like all the doors opened. Does that mean that you went back to the hospital to work as a nurse, but as a lactation consultant?
Yeah, no, I just went straight back as lactation.
Yeah.
So I
Cool.
just straight into lactation from that point forward. I've been in the hospital system ever since, except for until meeting you, and which is an entirely new experience that I love. But not at the same hospital system. I won't go into where.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I went from working into two different hospital systems, just lactation. That's all we did. At the time, we would see every single person on the unit, and it was a big unit.
That's amazing. That feels rare.
Yeah. We would see every single person that had a baby, unless they specifically said no. So I was exposed to a lot of different circumstances that we would not come across anymore these days.
I think you probably saw a lot of babies who were actually eating well.
Yes.
So you saw what was normal.
Yes.
Which is really interesting. The other day I had this experience where I asked someone, one of my colleagues who did similar work to what we do at Be Well Baby, and I said, have you ever have you ever had a client that didn't have nipple pain? Is that a thing that exists? I don't think it is. And she said, actually, no, I haven't. And then that same week, I had my first client who I was there for feeding. And so I assumed nipple pain. And I watched the baby latch and I was like, okay, great. Are you having any pain? No, it feels great.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, that can happen? So
yeah,
shocking.
it's actually pretty incredible.
Yes. And it's supposed to work that way.
Yeah. Easy.
So I'm curious what surprised you as a new clinician. What surprised you the most when you started working with families in lactation?
That they all expected it to just happen and not necessarily have any issues.
Yeah.
That it was just the baby was just supposed to latch and nurse, and we all just kind of moved forward, and that was that.
And that is rarely the case.
It's very rarely the case.
So what do you wish every new parent knew about lactation before they had a baby?
That it's hard.
It's so hard.
It's really hard, and it's really important to get help because it is really hard, but it can get really easy with the right help and support.
Yeah.
And really addressing whatever the main issue is and just providing them the right emotional support plan. And I think explaining things to them is really what's most important so that they understand what's actually happening. And then they are able to kind of wrap their mind around it and process it better.
Yeah.
And it makes more sense, kind of the light bulb going off.
Yeah, I think there's this huge lack of prenatal education around feeding. There's sort of like a little tidbit about feeding your baby when you take a birth class, but it's, for us, it's a 6-hour class. Because it's just, there is so much there and there's so much nuance and there's so many things that you can do beforehand to prepare, even mentally.
I find that even just spending a little bit of time explaining to them what to expect in the first 48 hours, maybe even 72, depending on how the conversation's going, but just letting them know the normal expectations in the first 48 hours so that they can prepare mentally for that has made a big difference.
Let's talk about it. What should people expect within the first 24, 48, 72 hours of meeting their baby for the first time?
Well, I would say ideally your baby's going to have a great first feed. They're going to latch, they're going to nurse for a really long time, but then they tend to just settle into more of a sleepy phase that first 24 hours. So they'll eat, but they don't always eat when we want them to, or every 2 to 3 hours when we try. So I just talk to them about doing hand expression, or I show them how to do it if I'm in person, how to hand express and give back until your baby really starts to wake up. And then right around that 24 hours is when they move to cluster feeding phase.
Yeah.
And I do a lot more explanation as to why they do that. And
That's so important.
makes more sense as we're trying to stimulate. Their tummy's really tiny. We're just getting little bits at a time. And so they just want to eat more often.
Yeah. And it's also their job in that first 24 to 48 hours to first 2 weeks of their lives to bring in your milk. It's their job to stimulate the nipple so that your milk comes in.
Right. And so if we're not stimulating, we're not feeding our baby, then that whole process really slows down. And so I do explain that that's a normal biological behavior. We actually want your baby doing that. It's a good sign. Then I have less concern of elevating jaundice levels or weight loss. So sometimes when they're hearing it from a different perspective, that it's actually a good thing, even though it might feel really exhausting.
I think it's really hard in that second day because people typically will think, oh, my baby's not getting enough. They're not getting anything.
Yeah. I don't have enough milk.
I don't have milk, which is colostrum is milk. It's like one of my favorite things to say is that if you're making colostrum, you are making milk. That is what your baby needs in those first 3 to 5 days.
Yeah.
Okay. I think this is like, I almost feel like you can't drive home that fact enough, because no matter how much I say it, I still have families who are like, I gave them all of my colostrum in the first 24 hours because we talk a lot about harvesting colostrum and having it on hand just in case your baby's struggling with latch or anything like that. But you also don't need to overfeed your baby. They're fussy maybe, or they're rooting a lot, or they're showing you signs that they're hungry, but it's all because they should be nursing.
It means that they are doing what we want them to do. I still do find there are certain cultures that do still perceive them not having milk, regardless if I can show it to them. They can visually see it with their eyes, but I feel like that's a generational conversation that parents or grandparents will say to them. And I can give them a lot of education, but often it's the grandma or the great grandma that's more believed of their perspective or their ideas of what a lot of milk should be.
Interesting.
Hey, I just wanted to pop in here to see if you're enjoying the show. To the 7 people who have left me 5-star reviews, I am in awe and so grateful for you. So grateful. I know it takes a minute to actually click out of here and leave a review and figure out what you want to say. Then the compliments on my voice were so unexpected and honestly the kindest thing that I could ever hope for. So, my voice aside, if I am helping you in any way, know that my mission is to get this information to as many families as possible. And that means I need a shit ton of reviews. So quick, pause me, leave a review, and then we'll get back to the show. Thank you in advance for your time. Okay, let's get back to the show.
So what are some of the things that I guess we're kind of getting into this with the grandparents, but what are some myths that you have heard of that are just not true? I can give you my favorite one.
Okay, go.
You should rough up your nipples. Why is that not true, Faith?
Because breastfeeding should not be painful. If your baby is using their tongue correctly and latching correctly, and we have that optimal latch, optimal function, then you really shouldn't have any pain. So
there's no reason
to
that
rough them up.
Should rough up your nipples to make you be able to tolerate more pain. I don't know, but please do not do that.
Yeah, they're fine, just how they are.
Anything else?
Pumping, using your breast pump a lot, means more milk.
Why is that not true? That makes sense to me that would be true, because if you're pumping a ton, you're pumping more milk, or maybe you're sending the signal to your brain to make more milk.
Well, if we're not using the right flange size, then it's not stimulating the nipple correctly. So you could be dry pumping and not actively stimulating appropriately. So your body's not going to respond to it quite as well.
Yeah.
Or at all.
Yeah. Also, our bodies don't respond as well to a pump as they do to a baby.
We just don't love that pump the same way we love our babies. So hormonally, you're not going to ever respond exactly the same. It's going to give us some, second best, but then you add an incorrect size flange to that situation and a tired mama.
So if you're listening to this and you're like, what's a flange? Go find that episode on flange sizes. Okay. Any other myths? Oh, how about cabbage leaves? What do we think about cabbage leaves?
I mean, I like them if they're not overused. However, it's just sometimes a lot.
Yeah.
It's to clean them, to wear them.
To be wearing vegetables.
It just is a little.
I think the cabbage leaf thing is, I'm not sure about the enzymes. I don't know about the science. But I do think that the cooling.
Yeah, I think it's the cooling that
cooling.
feels really good.
Yeah, so if you have an ice pack, that's also good.
And then you're not using vegetables, or I should say wearing vegetables.
Exactly. Okay. If you have any other myths that you are thinking of that any of your in-laws or mothers have told you, please drop a comment to us and we will answer that. I'm going to move on. Actually, I want to ask you, what do you feel like is different about the way that you approach lactation to just like your typical lactation consultant, besides flange sizing? Because we'll talk about that.
Right. I would say I feel like I do. I mean, I think we all listen. We all try to be, or we're taught to be good listeners and counselors. But I also think explaining it in a way that they can understand that's very specific or pertinent to their situation, that makes sense. And if you're not saying it in a way that the light bulb's going off, then you should try another way.
Yeah, I think it's really easy, especially when you're an expert in something, to think, okay, well, I know all of this, and so now you know all of this. And it's just not that way. They probably will take in about 20% of what we say.
Yeah.
And it's really important as a lactation consultant you are dealing with someone in like this incredibly vulnerable time, and it is really easy for them to take in 0% of what you say. So it's really important to really distill the most important pieces. And I think you do an amazing job of that.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I want them to understand why things are happening and not just tell them
What to do. I love that. Yeah. Let's move on to, I know so many of the people listening to this are going back to work and they're going to be using a bottle for their baby. And as lactation consultants, I think sometimes we get this reputation that we don't like bottles or something, but that's not really the case. And we are experts at helping with feeding. And from my perspective, working in the NICU as a physical therapist doing feeding is a very different perspective than even a lactation consultant perspective. So I think that we just like have this amazing toolkit that we can offer people with our understanding of bottles and flow. I think for me, the most common thing that I see is that families will buy the Dr. Brown off the shelf. And what flow rate is the Dr. Brown off the shelf?
number one,
And they think that because it's number one, that it's
a slow flow.
right. And is it?
No,
No.
not at all.
So what should families be thinking about when they're thinking about bottles?
That not all flow rates are the same from brand to brand. Not all bottle shapes are equal, even in the same family of brands. And how you position the baby and the bottle does matter.
We all have our favorites, right? We have our favorite bottles. What are some things that you're looking for in the shape of the nipple to the anatomy of the baby?
So I want to see sort of a triangular shape, or what we would call a transitional shape nipple, without any hard, what am I trying to say? Hard stops?
Hard stops?
I just
Yeah.
want to see the nipple itself just transition and flow like a triangle.
Like a
You might
boob.
hear people say like a triangle test, but yeah, it looks like a boob.
And we have to caveat here that no bottle will ever be able to be like a boob.
Right.
Boobs are amazing.
And they're not going to extend or stretch. They're not pliable like a real boob.
And the more a real boob is used, the more it stretches. And that is not the case with silicone. So
You want to see their lips flange as much as possible. You want to try to get that bottle in their mouth as far back as possible, depending on the brand, try to get the lips up to a ring, but that is dependent on a brand. But I also think it's really important to explain it's not so much that it's the bottle versus the boob, that it's more about the flow
Yeah.
of the nipple.
Yeah. If you have a really great nipple on your bottle, like really great shape, but it's a level 2, you're just going to be waterboarding, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe I shouldn't say
that's how I explain it. It is. They get waterboarded.
Yeah. They can't manage that flow.
No.
And they shouldn't have to. It's not what they're designed to do. I always tell my clients that flow rates are all marketing. So they tell you a level 1 is good for 0 to 3. And then at 3 months, you have to move to a level 2. And then at 6 months, you have to move to a Y cut or whatever it is. And actually never do you have to move past a preemie flow. A lot of people don't know that there's something called a T for transition. If we're talking about Dr. Brown, there are super slow and slow flow rates. And ultimately, your baby can stay
On the preemie.
the entire time that they are on a bottle until they go to a sippy cup.
I do sometimes increase the flow if I'm trying to match mom's flow because they have a really fast,
Yeah.
rapid flow. And then if the baby's showing signs that they're getting a little frustrated on the bottle and not taking quite as much per session. So there are cases that I do suggest increasing, but generally speaking, no, you shouldn't have to, especially age.
Totally. There are really specific sort of check boxes that we have in our sessions for, is your baby ready to have a faster flow or do they need to slow down? Because a lot of times it's really subtle what we're trying to accomplish in a feeding session. So what are some of the signs that the flow is too fast for a baby?
Choking, gulping,
Coughing,
sputtering,
eyes watering, furrowed brow.
not being able to coordinate that breathe, suck, swallow.
Oh, spilling.
Yeah.
Spilling if they're spilling out of their mouth. I've had families say, oh, my baby's a messy eater. Nope, the flow is just too fast.
Yeah. They're really gassy from a lot of the air swallowing.
What about if the flow rate is too slow?
They will take a really long time.
What's a long time? Like how long should a baby take to finish a bottle?
Well, it depends on how much they're drinking, but roughly about 5 minutes an ounce. I mean, I really don't want them taking more than 30 minutes to take a full volume bottle.
Yeah.
Older babies, if they're only taking 1 to 2 ounces and we're expecting them to take 3 to 5 ounces, and they will just stop at 1 to 2 and then want to eat again. And that sort of becomes a repetitive pattern. And then I want to make sure, what is mom's flow rate like? And usually those are all cases that I'm either already know or I'm confirming that they do have a faster flow and baby is just having to work harder on the bottle versus the breast. And they would rather not. Babies are going to go with whatever is easier.
Yeah. Whatever's more efficient. They're very smart little creatures. So one of the reasons that you might need to give your newborn a bottle is if you are triple feeding. Can you talk about what triple feeding is and why someone might need to do it?
Yeah, so triple feeding is pretty common, especially these days. Triple feeding means you're breastfeeding, you're pumping, and you're supplementing, typically usually with a bottle. It's usually when your baby is not able to efficiently move milk or milk supply is low. We're trying to protect the milk supply, but also ensure baby gets what they need if they are at a weight loss or have other medical conditions or causes that's preventing them from being able to efficiently breastfeed.
And how does that impact the mental health of the breastfeeding person?
Significantly. Significantly.
Yes, I think it's really overlooked that the research actually supports this concept that if you are struggling to feed your baby, you are at a very, very increased risk for mental health difficulties postpartum depression and anxiety. And part of that is the biology of feeding a baby, that like your brain, it thinks its only job is to feed this baby and to keep it alive. And so if you're having to feed your baby and then also hook yourself up to a machine and then feed your baby that milk, and like, it is a lot of work.
It's a lot. It's tedious. It's time consuming. There's very little break unless it's efficiently streamlined. I do streamline him anytime I have a family that's either doing a version of it or needs to have a feeding plan implemented. I will encourage them always to limit feeds to 15 minutes if we're starting there. Because I find that if we disconnect and we start only protecting the milk supply with pumping and having a partner always bottle feed, then the mother starts to feel very disconnected, and it almost impacts their mental health even more. So I like to keep that baby there if they're willing to, and that's something that their goal is to breastfeed their baby. Even if it's just during the day, and we just start at the day feeds, and we keep to just keeping things simple during the night of pumping and bottle feeding, but we can still do breastfeeding during the day, then they still feel like they have that connection, or moving it to after the bottle.
Yeah. I mean, this all just goes to show that even just one concept in lactation is so nuanced and so complicated. And that is why you need a lactation consultant. And that is why, I mean, amazing that you were like demanding the support that you needed, because most people don't know that they need that support, and also don't want to like be a bother, you know. That's like my least favorite thing, when people are like, well, I'm okay, there are people that are worse off, but like, let's help you thrive, you know.
Yeah.
And
I really didn't, at the time, I didn't know what to expect. I just knew I needed help, and this is something I didn't know about.
If your baby ever needs a pacifier, and not all babies do, the one that I would want in your world is the Ninny. It's the only pacifier designed to actually mimic the shape and function of the breast. It looks like this. It's very soft here, like an areola, and then harder, like a nipple. And this shape means that it supports healthy oral development instead of interfering with it. I really love it because babies don't just passively hold it in their mouth like the ones with a bulb on the end. They have to actively suck. It's hard work. It's my workout pacifier. And that matters for feeding, for regulation, and for long-term oral function. It's especially beautiful for breastfed babies who need a little extra soothing without confusion. If you're listening and you're pregnant, postpartum, or buying for someone you love, you can grab a Ninny through the link in the show notes or use the code BeWellBaby for 10% off at checkout.
Okay, Faith, I'm going to ask you some like rapid fire yes or no, like one or the other questions.
Okay.
Silverettes or no silverettes? It's not rapid fire.
It's not rapid fire. I mean, they're okay. I feel like they're expensive.
They are expensive.
And ideally, I wouldn't want you using them for very long, because we want to get to the root of the problem.
Right.
But they do have benefits to them.
They help with the pain.
Right.
If you're having the pain. We have a client right now who's using them as she's waiting for her baby's tongue tie release. Yeah. So she's in pain. She's using them. It helps.
Yes.
She has said that it is the only reason she can feed her baby, which is like a huge,
that's a big deal.
Huge thing to say. However, I do think some people use them wrong.
Yeah.
What is a wrong way to use silverettes?
Endlessly.
Like silverettes forever.
Endlessly and 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
So you're only taking them off to feed your baby and then you're putting them right back on.
Yeah, let's not do that. Also, let's not put any cream on your nipples and then put the silverettes on. The silverettes with just a little bit of breast milk, that is the safest way to use them. They can breed yeast if you use them too much, or if you are using nipple cream with them.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if you have the means to pay for them,
get some.
Great. Put them on your baby registry.
Yeah, put them on your registry for sure.
pacifiers?
I like them. It depends on the shape, though. Shape
Why?
matters.
Shape matters. Which pacifier do you like the best?
Well, the ninny.
We love the ninny.
We love the ninny. And then any cylinder shape pacifier.
Yeah.
Round that looks like a nipple.
Yeah. And part of what the cylinder helps with is tongue cupping.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why don't you like the bulb-shaped pacifiers?
Well, certain brands, I'll use an example like Bibs, has a big bulb at the end of it. And so what it's doing is it's going in and it's pushing up against the palate, and then it's just going to push it up and raise it more. They're going to use their tongue and just shove their tongue up to the roof of the mouth to hold it. Other shapes, same concept, just a different way of using that tongue incorrectly. Mm-hmm. Or shaping it incorrectly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of my babies had a pretty severe tongue tie and loved the Bibs pacifiers because it just popped right up into that high palate and stayed there. And then he didn't have to work to keep it in his mouth. And the ninny is so cool because it is so wide that it takes a lot of work to keep it in your mouth. Most families will say, oh, my baby can't keep it in their mouth. And I'm like, that's the point. That's why we use it. It's an exercise pacifier. Mm-hmm. So if you want a ninny, there's a link in the show notes. We love the ninny.
I love the ninny. It builds stamina too. I love it for building stamina.
Builds stamina and strength. Mm-hmm. It's so soft that it allows babies who are starting to prefer the hard silicone because they can coordinate really well around it. It allows those babies to have a different, softer surface where it's just a little bit more breast-like and it's a little harder to coordinate around.
Yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm. They actually have to use their tongue.
Yeah. Okay, the next one I'm going to ask you about is nipple shields.
I think that they can be a great tool if used correctly. They're a great bridge.
What about using a nipple shield forever?
No.
They're a bridge.
They're a bridge.
They're a bridge.
They're meant for a temporary tool to get things started or to keep things progressing while you're working on whatever the root of the problem is.
Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the unique things about working with you is that you're really looking for the root of the problem. You're not putting a Band-Aid on it. So I really appreciate that about you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This wasn't supposed to be just me telling you how great you are, but that's what it's turning into. Okay, now last question. What is one product that you just wish parents would throw away or not buy in the first place?
Nipple sizing kits.
Ooh, tell me more. If I have no idea what you're talking about, what's a nipple sizing kit?
It almost looks like a garage tool that has, or like a ring sizing kit might be another good example of one where it is a silicone piece of equipment that has a ton of different holes in it that are labeled different sizes. And you would just stick that over your nipple and that will tell you what size you're supposed to purchase.
And some kits will tell you, do the diameter of your nipple, and then your flange size is 2 millimeters bigger than that. And some flange sizing kits will tell you it's
1 to 4.
1 to 4. Why do you want families to throw those sizing kits away?
Because they should be sized by somebody who is experienced and has training to size correctly, because breasts come in all different shapes and sizes and elasticity and tissue, and it all fits different.
And flanges come in all different shapes and sizes, which if you're interested, please go listen to that bonus episode on flange sizing. And for my last question for you, Faith, today is, how do you feel like we can better support parents in feeding their babies on a systemic level? Like in our culture, what can we do to help parents in a way that actually moves the needle? Do you want to change the world? Let's change the world.
Let's change the world. Let's change how we feed our babies. Yeah, I think we're in a culture that we work more. we're not staying at home with our babies as much as maybe we used to, even centuries ago. And I think we just need to be more understanding of supporting also biologically what our babies are designed to do, but also support it in a way that's realistic for us to still be able to run a family and work if we want to work. And
if there's someone's boss or someone's partner listening to this, can we set some realistic expectations for what breastfeeding a baby actually is? Like what it actually takes time-wise?
Oh, all day. I mean, it's 24 hours a day, feeding your baby on demand when they're telling you they're hungry. I do think we culturally, I think that it's not normal for our babies to eat often and that they need to be more on a rigid sort of schedule of every 2 to 3 hours or 3 to 4 hours and only eat this many times.
I think that's true, especially of families who've been in a hospital too, in a NICU.
Yeah.
Because there is this rigid every 3 hours we have cares. And it's hard to transition out of that back to your home where you are then it's okay to feed your baby on demand, and it's okay if they want to eat every hour for a little bit. Cluster feeding is a normal part of being a baby.
And breast milk metabolizes much faster than formula in our bodies. So they're going to want to breastfeed more often than if they were getting formula and they were formula feeding. But I also remind parents we don't eat the same meal every time we eat. What we're going to eat for dinner is going to be very different than what we eat, say, for breakfast or for lunch. So watching those early cues are going to make your whole feeding process easier. And if your expectations of feeding frequency is more realistic to the norm or what like, biologically our babies are wanting to do, and just know that's okay.
Absolutely. I think a lot of families feel like cluster feeding is a problem that needs to be solved.
Yeah. Or that it's not normal.
It's not. It's not a problem. I also think that babies eating throughout the night seems like a problem.
Yeah.
It's very normal. It's how it should be.
It's how we protect that milk supply, especially when your prolactin levels are at their highest during those night feeds.
Your hormones that actually signal to your body to make milk are highest in those peak early morning hours where everyone's sleeping. So if you aren't emptying throughout the night, then you are signaling to your body to make less milk. And I think there are a lot of people who are afraid of a lack of sleep. So what would you say to those people who really want to breastfeed their babies, but they're terrified that not getting enough sleep is going to make them a monster?
We can always work on solo feeds at night or doing some sort of a team feeding style in the night so that each parent can get a little bit of a longer chunk of sleep instead of assuming that it's just the mother's responsibility to be always feeding that baby. I like to incorporate having the partner be one of the people that's getting up and doing a feed. And it just allows for each parent to get a little bit of a longer stretch, but also doesn't necessarily impact supply, you know, depending on the window of time.
Yeah. So what is that window of time?
Really nothing more than 5 or 6 hours.
5 or 6 feels long to me too. I usually say 4.
Yeah, in the early days, I would say 4.
Sure.
But as we're getting a little bit bigger and putting more weight on.
And how old would you say that you can move to that 5 or 6 hours? And that's one stretch of 5 or 6 hours.
And you'll feel like a whole new human after that. I don't know if I have a certain age so much as it seems like how things are progressing. What's the milk supply already like? Or like at that time, how old is the baby? What's the weight of the baby? How are they gaining? So I don't know that I have a perfect recommendation for that. It just seems like it depends on how things overall are progressing.
Yeah. It's so hard when it depends because it means you have to ask for your specific situation.
Yeah, because every situation is different. It's really important to find somebody that can help you figure out what that looks like for you and not what it looked like for your sister or your friend.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Faith. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I know that everyone learned so much and that we have so much more to learn.
Thank you, Emily.
Faith, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today, for your years and years of expertise that you share with our clients, and for being the kind of clinician who still thinks about her patients and wants them to understand the why, not just what to do. If there's one thing I really want you to take from today, it's this. You are not a bother for asking for help. You are not failing if feeding is hard. You are a human in one of the most vulnerable seasons of your life, and you deserve someone who will actually answer your questions and not dismiss your experience. If you want Faith in your bedroom with you and your fresh baby, or in your living room with a flange sizing experience before your baby even arrives, just reach out. We're always here to help. I'll see you next week. Audio and music production by the amazing Peter Gary, with Lillian Ewert managing all scheduling and operations of Be Well Baby, including this podcast. Thank you both for making this happen. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and I'd love for you to follow us on Instagram at BeWellBabyPDX or visit BeWellBaby.org to book a time to chat with us. And if this episode helped you, please send it to someone who's pregnant, postpartum, or someone in your life who wants to support you better. No one should have to do this alone. Welcome to Be Well Baby. You're in the right place.